Jeconiah, Greek, iota epsilon k omicron nu iota alpha sigma, Latin, Jeconias, also known as Coniah and as Jehoiachin, was a king of Judah who was dethroned by the king of Babylon in the 6th century BC and was taken into captivity. He was the son and successor of King Jehoiakim. Most of what is known about Jeconiah is found in the Hebrew Bible. Records of Jeconiah's existence have been found in Iraq, such as the Jehoiachin's Rations tablets. These tablets were excavated near the Ishtar Gate in Babylon and have been dated to c. 592 BC. Written in cuneiform, they mention Jeconiah and his 5 sons as recipients of food rations in Babylon. Comparing Babylonian records with date references found in Hebrew biblical texts, the length of Jeconiah's captivity can accurately be determined. Jeconiah in Scripture. Jeconiah reigned 3 months and 10 days, from December 9, 598 to March 15, 597 BC. He succeeded Jehoiakim as king of Judah 2 Key 24-6 in December 598. After raiders from surrounding lands invaded Jerusalem 2 Key 24-2 and killed his father. It is likely that the king of Babylon was behind this effort, as a response to Jehoiakim's revolt, starting sometime after 601 BC. 3 months and 10 days after Jeconiah became king, the armies of Nebuchadnezzar II seized Jerusalem. The intention was to take high-class Judahite captives and assimilate them into Babylonian society. On March 15, 16, 597 BC, Jeconiah, his entire household and 3,000 Jews, were exiled to Babylon. Masoretic text versions of 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verse 9 say that Jeconiah's rule began at the age of 8. However, the Septuagint and Syriac versions of 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verse 9 state that his reign started at the age of 18. Of the Vulgate, Challoner's note in the Douay-Rheims Bible reconciles this discrepancy. He was associated by his father to the kingdom when he was but 8 years old, but after his father's death, when he reigned alone, he was 18 years old. During exile after Jeconiah was deposed as king, Jeconiah's uncle, Zedekiah 2 Key 24:17, was appointed by Nebuchadnezzar to rule Judah. Zedekiah was the son of Josiah. However, while in captivity, the deported Jews still regarded Jeconiah as their legitimate king. Jeconiah would later be regarded as the first of the exiles. In the book of Ezekiel, the author refers to Jeconiah as king and dates certain events by the number of years he was in exile. The author identifies himself as Ezekiel, a contemporary of Jeconiah, and he never mentions Zedekiah by name. Released from captivity according to 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 27, Jeconiah was released from prison in the 37th year of the exile, in the year that Amel-Marduk came to the throne. Babylonian records show that Amel-Marduk began his reign in October 562 BC. According to 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 27, Jeconiah was released from prison on the 27th day of the 12th month, during March of 561 BC. This indicates the first year of captivity to be 597 BC, according to Judah's Tishra-based calendar. The 37th year of captivity was thus, by Judean reckoning, the year that began in Tishra of 562. Consistent with the synchronism to the accession year of Amel-Marduk given in Babylonian records. Curse Jeremiah, curse Jeconiah that none of his descendants would ever sit on the throne of Israel. Thus says the Lord, write this man down as childless, a man who shall not prosper in his days, for none of his descendants shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David, and ruling any more in Judah. Genealogy. Jeconiah was the son of Jehoiakim with Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. He had 7 children: Shealtiel, Malchiram, Pedaiah, Shenazar, Jeconiah, Hoshama and Nedabiah. Jeconiah is also mentioned in the first book of Chronicles as the father of Pedaiah, who in turn is the father of Zerubbabel. A list of his descendants is given in 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verses 17 to 24. In listing the genealogy of Jesus Christ, Matthew chapter 1 verse 11 records Jeconiah as an ancestor of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Because of the curse upon Jeconiah, recorded in Jeremiah, some biblical scholars conclude Joseph could not be the biological father of Jesus, providing further support for the virgin birth of Jesus. Dating Jeconiah's reign, the Babylonian Chronicles establish that Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem the first time on 2 Adar 597 BC. Before Wiseman's publication of the Babylonian Chronicles in 1956, Thiele had determined from biblical texts that Nebuchadnezzar's initial capture of Jerusalem and its king Jeconiah occurred in the spring of 597 BC, whereas Kenneth Strand points out that other scholars, including Albright, more frequently dated the event to 598 BC. This is one of several instances cited by Strand showing that Thiele's approach of starting with the biblical texts and assuming they were correct, until proven otherwise, combined with his extensive knowledge of the recording methods of ancient historians, produced results that were useful in correcting dates derived from secular history. Assuming that Jeconiah's reign ended on the day that the Babylonians captured Jerusalem the first time, 2 Adar 597 BC, and further assuming that the Jewish calendar in the 6th century BC had the same number of days in the 2 preceding months as in the modern Jewish calendar, Jehoiachin's reign of 3 months and 10 days would have started on 21 Heshvan 598 BC. Thiele's dates is quoted above. Thiele said that the 25th anniversary of Jeconiah's captivity was April 25, 573 BC, implying that he began the trip to Babylon on 10 Nisan 597, 24 years earlier. His reasoning in arriving at this exact date was based on Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1, where Ezekiel, without naming the month, says it was the 10th day of the month, on that very day, an expression that Thiele knew marked something important, since this fits with his idea that Jeconiah's trip to Babylon began a month later than the capturing of the city, thus allowing a new Nisan-based year to begin. Thiele took these words in Ezekiel as referring to the day in which the captivity or exile proper began. He therefore ended Jehoiachin's reign of 3 months and 10 days on this date. The dates he gives for Jeconiah's reign are then 21 Heshvan 598 BC to 10 Nisan 597 BC. Thiele's reasoning in this regard has been criticized by Roger C. Young, who advocates the 587 date for the fall of Jerusalem. Young points out Thiele's inconsistent arithmetic, and adds an alternative explanation of the phrase, on that very day, in Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1. This phrase is used 3 times in Leviticus chapter 23 verses 28 to 30 to refer the Day of Atonement, always observed on the 10th of Tishri, and Ezekiel's writings in several places show familiarity with the book of Leviticus. A further argument in favor of this interpretation is that in the same verse, Ezekiel says it was Rosh Hashanah and also the 10th of the month, indicating the start of a Jubilee year, since only in a Jubilee year did the year begin on the 10th of Tishri, the Day of Atonement. The Talmud and the Seder Olam also say that Ezekiel saw his vision at the beginning of a Jubilee year, the 17th. Consistent with this interpretation of Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1, because this offers an alternative explanation to Thiele's interpretation of Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1, and because Thiele's chronology for Jeconiah is incompatible with the records of the Babylonian Chronicle. The info box below dates the end of Jeconiah's reign to 2 Adar 597 BC, the date of the first capture of Jerusalem as given in the Babylonian records. Thiele's dates for Jeconiah, however, and his date of 586 BC for the fall of Jerusalem, continue to hold considerable weight with the scholarly community. The 586 date for Jerusalem's fall will also continue to be popular with scholars who hold that, for one reason or another, Zedekiah's years must be measured in an accession sense. However, no such complication is necessary since the 10th of Tishri 574 BC is precisely as stated in Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1. Both in the 14th year of the temple's destruction in 587 BC and the 25th year of Jeconiah's exile in 597 BC. Gershon Galil also attempted to reconcile a 586 date for the fall of Jerusalem with the data for Jeconiah's exile. Like Thiele, he assumed that the years of exile should be measured from Nisan, but for a different reason. Galil hypothesized that Israel's calendar was 1 month ahead of that of Babylon because Babylon had inserted an intercalary month and Israel had not yet done so. This would make Adar in the Babylonian records correspond to Nisan in Judean counting. But this hypothesis, like Thiele's, runs into difficulty with Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1. Since the 25th year of captivity would begin in Nisan of 573 and the fall of Jerusalem, 14 years earlier, would be in 587, not the 586 that Galil and Thiele advocate. There is further conflict with the Babylonian data, because the 37th year of captivity, the year in which Jeconiah was released from prison, would be the year starting in Nisan of 561 BC, not Nisan of 562 BC as given in the Babylonian Chronicle. Recognizing these conflicts, Galil will admit that his date for the fall of Jerusalem is inconsistent with the precise data given in the Bible and the Babylonian Chronicle, dating the fall of Jerusalem using Jeconiah's dating. The reign of Jeconiah is considered important in establishing the chronology of events in the early 6th century BC in the Middle East. This includes resolving the date of the fall of Jerusalem to Nebuchadnezzar. According to Jeremiah chapter 52 verse 6, the city wall was breached in the summer month of Tammuz in the 11th year of Zedekiah. Historians, however, have been divided on whether the year was 587 or 586 BC. A 1990 study listed 11 scholars who preferred 587 and 11 who preferred 586. The Babylonian records of the second capture of Jerusalem have not been found, and scholars looking at the chronology of the period must rely on the biblical texts, as correlated with extant Babylonian records from before and after the event. In this regard, the biblical texts regarding Jeconiah are especially important, because the time of his reign in Jerusalem was fixed by Donald Wiseman's 1956 publication, and this is consistent with his 37th year of captivity overlapping the accession year of Amel-Marduk, as mentioned above. Ezekiel's treatment of Jeconiah's dates are a starting point for determining the date of the fall of Jerusalem. He dated his writings according to the years of captivity he shared with Jeconiah, and he mentions several events related to the fall of Jerusalem in those writings. In Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1, Ezekiel dates his vision to the 25th year of the exile and 14 years after the city fell. The Hebrew preposition used here, aha, necessitates that a full 14 years had elapsed since the fall of the city. If Ezekiel and the author of 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 27 were both using Tishri-based years, the 25th year would be 574-573 BC and the fall of the city, 14 years earlier, would be in 588-587, i.e., in the summer of 587 BC. This is consistent with other texts in Ezekiel related to the fall of the city. Ezekiel chapter 33 verse 21 relates that a refugee arrived in Babylon and reported the fall of Jerusalem in the 12th year, 10th month of our exile, measuring from the first year of exile, 597. This was January of 586 BC, incompatible with Jerusalem falling in the summer of 586 BC, but consistent with its fall in the summer of 587 BC. The other side holds that since Jeconiah surrendered in March 597, January 586 is less than 11 years later and can in no way be considered in the 12th year of the exile. Thiele held to a 586 BC date for the capture of Jerusalem and the end of Zedekiah's reign, recognizing to some extent the importance of Ezekiel's measuring time by the years of captivity of Jeconiah, and in particular the reference to the 25th year of that captivity in Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1. He wrote, "Although the Babylonian tablets dealing with the final fall and destruction of Jerusalem have not been found, it should be noticed that the testimony of Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1 is definitive in regard to the year 586. Since Ezekiel had his vision of the temple on the 25th anniversary of his and Jehoiachin's captivity, and since this was the 14th year after Jerusalem's fall, the city must have fallen 11 years after the captivity. 11 years after 597 is 586. The logic here is mistaken. In order to justify his 586 date, Thiele had assumed that the years of captivity for Jeconiah must be calendar years starting in Nisan, in contrast to the Tishra-based years that he used everywhere else for the kings of Judah. He also assumed that Jeconiah's captivity or exile was not to be measured from Adar of 597 BC, the month Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem and its king according to the Babylonian Chronicle, but in the next month, Nisan, when Thiele assumed Jeconiah began the trip to Babylon. These assumptions are not unreasonable, and, granting him, the first year of captivity would be the year starting in Nisan of 597 BC. The 25th year of captivity would start in Nisan of 573 BC, 24 years later. Years of captivity must be measured in this non-accession sense, otherwise the 37th year of captivity, the year in which Jeconiah was released from prison, would start on Nisan 1 of 560 BC, 2 years after the accession year of Amel-Marduk. According to the dating of his accession year that can be fixed with exactitude by the Babylonian Chronicle. Thiele then noted that Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 1 says that this 25th year of captivity was 14 years after the city fell. 14 years before 573 572 is 587 586, and since Thiele is assuming Nisan years for the captivity, this period ended the day before Nisan 1 of 586. But this is 3 months and 9 days before Thiele's date for the fall of the city on 9 Tammuz 586 BC. Even Thiele's assumption that the years of captivity were measured from Nisan does not reconcile Ezekiel's chronology for the captivity of Jeconiah with a 586 date, and the calculation given above that uses the customary Tishra-based years yields the summer of 587. Consistent with all other texts in Ezekiel related to Jeconiah's captivity. Another text in Ezekiel offers a clue to why there has been such a conflict over the date of Jerusalem's fall in the first place. Ezekiel chapter 24 verses 1 to 2 records the following. In the 9th year, in the 10th month on the 10th day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, record this date, this very date. Because the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day, assuming that dating here is according to the years of exile of Jeconiah. As elsewhere in Ezekiel, the Babylonian siege at Jerusalem began on January 27, 589 BC. This can be compared to a similar passage in 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 1. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The 9th year, 10th month, 10th day in Ezekiel is identical to the period in 2 Kings. In Ezekiel, the years are everywhere else measured according to Jeconiah's captivity, which must be taken in a non-accession sense, so that the beginning of the siege was 8 actual years after the beginning of the captivity. The comparison with 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 1 would indicate that Zedekiah's years in 2 Kings were also by non-accession reckoning. His 11th year, the year in which Jerusalem fell, would then be 587 BC. In agreement with all texts in Ezekiel and elsewhere that are congruent with that date. Some who maintain the 586 date therefore maintain that in this one instance, Ezekiel, without explicitly saying so. Another view is that a later copyist, aware of the 2 Kings passage, modified it and inserted it into the text of Ezekiel. In his study of all biblical texts related to the Babylonian capture of Jerusalem, Jung concludes that these conjectures are not necessary, and that all texts related to the fall of Jerusalem in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, 2 Kings, and 2 Chronicles are internally consistent and consistent with the fall of the city in Tammuz of 587 BC. Archaeological findings. During his excavation of Babylon in 1899 to 1917, Robert Coljoy discovered a royal archive room of King Nebuchadnezzar near the Ishtar Gate. It contained tablets dating to 595-570 BC. The tablets were translated in the 1930s by the German Assyriologist Ernst Weidner. 4 of these tablets list rations of oil and barley given to various individuals, including the deposed King Jehoiachin, by Nebuchadnezzar from the royal storehouses. Dated 5 years after Jehoiachin was taken captive. One tablet reads, 10 to the king of Judah, Yehoiachin, 2.5 selah to the offspring of Judah's king, 4 selah to 8 men from Judea. Another reads, 1.5 selah for 3 carpenters from Arvad, 1/2 apiece, 11.5 selah for 8 woodworkers from Byblos, 3.5 selah for 7 Greek craftsmen, 1/2 selah apiece, 1/2 selah to the carpenter. Nebuchadnezzar, 10 selah to Iowakuukinu, the son of Judah's king, 2.5 selah for the 5 sons of the Judean king. The Babylonian Chronicles are currently housed in the Pergamum Museum in Berlin.